Hey buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and this is part 16 of my Whispers of the Old Gods card review. Blizzard just dumped a bunch of cards on their Facebook page, and I'm powering through them all 10 cards at a time for each video. So join me as I review 10 more cards in the Whispers of the Old Gods set, starting off with the new warrior card, Bloodsail Cultist. This is a 3-mana minion that has 3 attack and 4 health and a really cool battle cry. If you control a pirate, give your weapon +1/+1, and of course this is a pirate itself, and this card to me is absolutely incredible. I love 3-mana 3/4s. I think they're really important to have in a deck that's trying to do anything good in the early to mid game. And of course, they've shown a lot of power in decks or classes like Priest with cards like Dark Cultist in the past. It's really kind of the go-to stat line that you want to have for a good 3-drop. And Warriors also had some success with the card like Fierce Monkey at the 3-drop, which is good. But this gives you that in a pirate flavor, which is important because I think there's some good pirate cards in Whispers of the Old Gods, and I think Pirate Warrior is a very legitimate deck archetype. We certainly haven't seen it in action yet, but all the pieces seem to be there. And Bloodsail Cultist is another great pirate synergy card. Even if you don't get the battle cry off, you're usually pretty happy to play a 3/4 on 3 just because it trades so effectively with early game stuff. And since this one also has a good buff, if you're able to get some pirates out onto the board and stick 1 or 2, and you're able to get a weapon out, you're getting a lot of value out of this 3-drop, because +1/+1 on your weapon is actually a huge deal. In many cases, that can be worth 2 to 4 mana, depending on the original mana cost of the weapon. Imagine a Gorehowl getting an extra charge and going up to an 8/2, for instance. How much mana would that be worth? A lot. It's doubling your Gorehowl. In the right settings, in the right scenarios, this card is going to make some big plays and open up a lot of stuff. Plus, the good thing, turn 3 is typically when you're starting to think about killing bigger stuff. So weapons like Fiery War Axe are about to run out of gas because you just played it, and suddenly the 3 attack isn't quite enough to kill the bigger things that your opponent are playing. So this essentially refills the durability on the card, on the Fiery War Axe, and allows it to trade into bigger things. So if you hit this on curve with a weapon in hand, or weapon equipped, I should say, it sets up really nicely for a strong mid-game. If you played multiple of these, you could do some nice stuff through the mid-range minion phase. So I like Bloodsail Cultist a ton. Very strong card in my mind. Up next is Blood to Icore. It's a 1-mana spell. It reads, deal 1 damage to a minion. If that minion survives, summon a 2/2 slime. So this is pretty intriguing. Warriors have a lot of different ways to do 1 damage to stuff and typically gain benefits from that. And this is a new variation on that. So a 2/2 minion for 1 mana, for the record, is pretty solid. That's a lot of value for 1 mana. It's going to be powerful early game play if you can pull it off. Particularly when you think about cards like Acolyte of Pain, which you like to do damage anyway. So a turn 4 Acolyte of Pain into Blood to Icore is really a pretty solid play, because you're getting a 1/2 and a 2/2 for 4 mana and also drawing a card. You feel a lot better about the Acolyte of Pain when you're able to use this card in combination with it. Of course, you can also use it on opponent's cards. It'll still summon the slime for you. So if they have a 4 health minion, you've got the Fiery War Axe, you can actually open with this and then Fiery War Axe it down to enable the clear and to summon your slime. So also great Execute enabler, of course. Execute's a very prominent warrior card, and this might actually be the best Execute enabler now that I think about it, because you gain a benefit, a pretty solid benefit at that, and you're still enabling the Execute effectively and very cheaply as well. So for 2 mana, you can kill anything and get a 2/2. I'll take it. This is going to be a good card. It's going to be played in Patron Warrior decks. It's going to be played in Control Warrior decks. It might even be played in Warrior decks we haven't imagined yet, because Whispers of the Old Gods is going to change so much. I really like Blood to Icore a lot. I think it's pretty sick. Moving on to the neutral minion Bog Creeper. This is a 7-mana minion. It's pretty basic. It is much like Fin Creeper, which it is clearly based on with some funny altered art. But it's a 6/8 instead of a 3/6. And I don't think it's very good. I will say that in Whispers of the Old Gods, basic taunt cards like this appear like they're going to be at least a little bit better. Much of the design is focused on big minions and keeping them alive, but this is still just too susceptible to hard removal. It still dies to those executes really easily and all those hexes and all those things. So it's just too big of an investment, all dedicated into one minion. The stats are fine for the cost, but nothing about this card stands out. And other than budget players who really need big minions, which this is going to be good for at a common level cost, I just don't think this will be played in competitive decks. There's just too many other things that fit mana costs and mana curves better or do something unique that Bog Creeper doesn't do. That said, this will be an amazing arena card. Anybody who lands on this in arena, it's going to feel pretty good. Up next is the Hunter card, Carrion Grub. 3-mana minion. It is a beast, of course, and it has 2/5 in stats. So this is kind of a baby Oasis Snapjaw in my mind, because it also has a giant gaping jaw. But instead of being a 2/7 for 4, this is the 2/5 for 3. So for 1 less mana, you're still getting the same attack and you're only giving up 2 health, which to me feels like a pretty good trade. And this card might just look like a really basic, boring beast that doesn't have any effects or do anything cool. But Oasis Snapjaw is the same thing and has actually seen play in Hunter decks before, just because sometimes you need a sturdy beast body on the board to enable cards like Houndmaster's buff and various other beast synergies that can benefit the Hunter, and this one feels like a good one. It slots in at a mana cost that's even better for Houndmaster than does Oasis Snapjaw. So certainly a boring card, but not necessarily a bad one. So I feel like this might actually show up here and there. That said, it's probably still worse than Desert Camel in many cases, which is a 2/4 for 3 with a positive effect. But if there's a metagame where most decks are running 1-drop minions, then Desert Camel could be worse than Carrion Grub. Moving on. Another neutral minion. This time it is a Murloc called Corrupted Seer. It's a 6-mana minion, which is crazy for a Murloc. I believe that makes it the most expensive Murloc by far, actually. I think the next most expensive Murloc is 4 mana, unless I'm forgetting somebody. But the Corrupted Seer is still only a 2/3, despite being 6 mana, which must mean that its effect is pretty crazy, right? And yeah, actually, the effect is pretty crazy. Deal 2 damage to all non-Murloc minions. So the battle cry on Corrupted Seer is essentially a Demon Wrath, a Warlock's Demon Wrath bundled into a card, and except it's Murlocs instead of demons in Demon Wrath. So actually this is a pretty neat card, but I don't actually think it's a neat card for Murloc decks. Murloc decks, of course, want a really low curve traditionally so they can get reliable, consistent Murlocs out of the board early and start buffing those Murlocs to run over their opponents. And typically, if you draw a 6-drop early in your curve, card draw for a low curve Murloc deck, it's going to be stuck in your hand and really throw off your reliable early game plays. In other words, you'll be missing minions when you need them. You'll be sitting on a card way too long, and you won't be able to get stuff out onto the board on exact mana curves like you need to win. So it feels pretty punishing in that regard. Plus, it's just a 2/3, so even when you play it, I'm not sure it helps that much. The idea, of course, is that you establish a Murloc board, you play Corrupted Seer. Anything your opponent has done to kind of rebut your Murloc board is going to get wiped away, potentially from a Corrupted Seer when they kill everything else. But I just don't think that's that good, because Murlocs want to hit face traditionally and rush people down, and they don't necessarily care about what their opponent's board is doing. And turn 6 is just a little bit too late to try to like stabilize against enemy board pressure or board presence. So if this was like a 4-drop, 1/1 that had the same effect, it might be much better in Murloc decks. Now, all that said, maybe not good in Murloc decks, maybe not designed for Murloc decks. I do actually think that Corrupted Seer could potentially be played in non-Murloc decks as a sort of removal spell. It's not a spell, but it's much like a Consecration, right? In a deck that plays from really far behind, it's a explosive sheep. The problem, of course, is that it's a very expensive explosive sheep, and typically you don't want to spend that much mana on that kind of removal. But who knows? I mean, if you're a deck that's playing from behind and trying to stabilize, getting a 2/3 minion and killing an enemy board can be valuable. I just think this card is awkward. I'm having trouble explaining why and where it may live, but in reality, it's just awkward. It doesn't fit into anything. It's kind of counterintuitive in its effect and its body and its cost. It feels just kind of pieced together without really thought for who might need it and how it might be used. So I think Corrupted Seer is going to be a failure for the Murlocs, and if anything else, it might just be designed to make some Murloc synergy cards worse, or cards that summon Murlocs like Murloc Knight a little worse. So Corrupted Seer, I just don't think you're that good. So let's move on to the next card. It is the 5-mana neutral minion Crazed Worshipper. This is a taunt card that has 3/6 in stats. So I can pretty quickly directly compare it to cards like Sinjin Shieldmaster, which is a 3/5 for 4, or Sledge Belcher, which was a 3/5 for 5 with an extra 1/2, so total of about 4/7 in stats. So when you look at the raw stats, it definitely looks worse than some of the other taunts we've had in the past, because Sinjin Shieldmaster is almost as good, but costs a mana less. But of course, Crazed Worshipper is a Cthulhu synergy card, so whenever this minion takes damage, give your Cthulhu +1/+1. So in all likelihood, this is going to at least give your Cthulhu +1/+1, and potentially +2/+2 or more. And maybe +2/+2 is the most common outcome, actually, because 6 health is pretty hard to deal with cleanly, and that's probably why it's important that it has 6 health instead of 5. But the problem is, I think Cthulhu decks really have to try to stay alive until their Cthulhu turns late in the game, and I'm not sure that this taunt is impactful enough at 5 mana, and a +1/+1 or +2/+2 buff might not be worth falling behind on the board. In other words, I might rather just run a Sinjin Shieldmaster a turn earlier and sacrifice the Cthulhu buff. But that said, you know, I can see this card being playable too. 6 health is an important distinction over 5, so that may be worth the extra mana cost over Sinjin Shieldmaster. And depending on the power of Cthulhu decks, who knows how many this will fit into. But I will say it's an epic quality card, so pretty expensive to craft, and might be punishing if new players try this out and it doesn't work. So just be careful with Crazed Worshipper. I'm not sure it's that good, and it's certainly not, in my mind, a Sludge Belcher-esque replacement. Moving on to a new mage card at 2 mana, the Cult Sorcerer. This is a 3/2 for 2, which is awesome. It's a good start. It's also got spell damage +1, which is awesome. So it's like Kobold Geomancer with better stats. And it has Cthulhu synergy. So after you cast a spell, give your Cthulhu +1/+1. So this is kind of the Tempo Mage Cthulhu synergy card. I like this one. At 2 mana, there will be a lot of times you can play this and cast a couple spells. So you're going to get that Cthulhu buff. Plus, you'll want to cast spells after you play it because you're getting spell damage +1. So if they got a 7 health minion, you can Cult Sorcerer. You can Fireball to clear that 7 health minion. You're still buffing your Cthulhu, so it's got some kind of background benefits, and the card itself is good anyway, so it's all upside. There's a lot to like about this card. I think it will be a staple Cthulhu deck card and might even be played in other mage deck scenarios, just because a 3/2 with spell damage really isn't too bad to have. I like Cult Sorcerer in pretty much every way. Overall, solid card. Up next is the scariest card ever. It's the Cyclopian horror, or Cyclopian. I don't really know how you'd say that, but it's a Cyclops, and it's a horror. And it definitely is horrifying. Its hairdo is something else. But it's a 4-mana minion, neutral, that's a 3/3 at its base level, but it has a pretty neat battle cry. I should also say it's a taunt. So a 4-mana 3/3 taunt is bad. It's objectively worse than Sinjin Shieldmaster, but the battle cry is neat. Gain +1 health for each enemy minion. So I think Cyclopean Horror is essentially designed as a counter to a zoo meta, or kind of a token meta where opponents try to get lots and lots of minions out onto the board. So they've got 4 or 5 Silverhand recruits out there, and you play Cyclopean Horror. You might have a 3/8 taunt for 4 mana, which is pretty sick. But the problem with Cyclopean Horror, of course, is that if they don't have any minions out there, if you've stabilized and you're just trying to play a minion, you're going to get a 3/3 for 4, which is pretty disappointing. So the break-even point with this card and Sinjin Shieldmaster, of course, is 2 minions on the enemy board. So they have to have 2, you become a 3/5, you break even. So they have to have 3 minions for this to be better than Sinjin Shieldmaster. And I think that's a problem, actually. Obviously, there will be times when opponents have more than 3 minions, and this will be a decent card. And sometimes they'll have 7 minions too. That's very possible. The issue is that by that point, you're probably already very far behind, which means you're already losing the game. So consistency issues will crop up, and basically, if you get this on turn 4 in those scenarios, that's fantastic. If you don't, you're so far behind already, it didn't matter. And if you get this late, it's going to punish you to the point where it's too late for this to matter. So in other words, if they have 7 3-attack minions, playing a 3/10 really may not even help all that much because you're so far behind. So I think I would really just typically prefer the Sinjin Shieldmaster, so I know I have a consistent minion that's good at any point in the game and isn't going to punish me for being head on the board, essentially, because that's what Cyclopean Horror does. It punishes you for being good. So that's why I think this card has trouble fitting into decks. Does it go into really control style decks where you expect to be behind early? Because that's control decks typically let the opponent get a big board and then stabilize. If that's the case, this card is too risky in late game control style matchups simply because it becomes much worse than a Sinjin Shieldmaster. If you're trying to get ahead early and hold back the enemy pressure because you're either a mid-range or aggressive style deck, then you might be ahead on the board by turn 4, and this is bad again. So I don't know where it fits. I don't know where it lives. But it is a zoo counter. If stuff gets crazy out of hand, perhaps Cyclopean Horror is the answer, the tech card that you add in to make it good. But just the fact that they have to have 3 minions for this to be a good card is so conditional and to my mind, not beneficial enough and inconsistent enough that it's just not very good. So let's move on to a new priest card. This is the Darkshire Alchemist, 5-mana priest minion. It's 4/5 in stats and has a battle cry, restore 5 health. So I've actually seen a lot of positive feedback for the Darkshire Alchemist, but I don't think it's very good. I think this is a pretty weak card. People instantly started comparing this to Antique Healbot, of course, which we're losing with standard format. The 5-mana 3/3 that restores 8 health. And they said, oh, this is way better. You still get a solid heal, but you get way better stats. You get 4/5 instead of 3/3, so it trades so much better into stuff and helps you establish the board. All that's true, but I think people forgot to compare this card to, I believe it's the Dark Scale Healer. I'm blanking on the name because no one ever plays it because it's not that good. It's the, I believe it's the neutral classic card, totally free to everybody. The 5-mana 4/5 that restores 2 health to both you and all your minions. And in my eyes, that card is just better than this one. It still has the potential to heal your hero, but also heals your board, which in Priest Has a ton of synergies with cards like Northshire Clerics and all the other heal buffing synergies that Priest has. So you can get 4 heals instead of 1. And Priests are also good at maintaining a board with all the high health stuff that they have and all the buffs to health that they have. So that one seems to have more positive synergies with the class. Plus, Priest doesn't always need extra healing. It's not like a lot of control priests were running anti-kill bots between stuff like Justicar Trueheart and Flash Heals and Light of the Narus. They had a lot of healing already and weren't running anti-kill bots. So why would Darkshire Alchemist ever be better than Darkscale Healer? I hope I'm getting that name right. Anyway, it's the Naga that's a 4/5 for 5 that heals 2 to all. I don't think this card is good. I'd love to be proven wrong. I hope it gets played. I like healing cards. I like solid stat cards, but it's just too average, and it doesn't fit what Priest is trying to do. It lacks like the utility of a Flash Heal, because Flash Heal can be used with Alchemist Soul Priest to do damage, and a lot of time that's how it's used. Flash Heal's good in at least Starseeker decks to turn into legendaries at some point. So I don't get Darkshire Alchemist. I'd rather just have a strong 5-mana taunt or a strong 5-mana minion that can be buffed or has some powerful effect. So this card doesn't work for me. I might be wrong, but I think it's below average. And then one last card to look at in this video is a Warlock card by the name of Darkshire Councilman. It's a 3-mana minion that has 1/5 in stats, which is intriguing. It's actually pretty good for Zoo-style decks who like to play high-health minions to stay alive and receive buffs. And this one's very good at that because of its effect. After you summon a minion, gain +1 attack. I think this card has the potential to be really troublesome, actually, in the sense that it's really good. It could be overpowered quite quickly. It kind of reminds me of like the old Undertaker, the pre-nerf Undertaker that gained stats every time you summoned a Death Rattle minion and would quickly become like a 5/5 or I guess a 5/6 or 4/5 by turn 3 or 4. I think that you can play Darkshire Councilman on turn 3 and then summon a bunch of imps or play a bunch of 1-drops and suddenly it's a 4/5 on turn 4 with a board right next to it. And that's a pretty scary proposition. And since it has 5 health on turn 3, I think it's going to be difficult for opponents to kill it within a turn or two, which means sometimes this could be a 6/7 attack minion that's just either doing work to the enemy board or just hitting face for tons of damage. And Warlock doesn't have any trouble summoning minions. There's been lots of cards in the past and still lots of cards that do pump out imps. So the potential for this to be a 3-mana 4/5 is quite likely, and I think it'll be a 3-mana 3/5 most of the time, and I would argue a 3-mana 2/5 is good enough. So if this survives its turn and you just play one more minion, it's a value card. 2/5 in stats for 3 is fantastic. So I don't see anything bad about Darkshire Councilman. I think it fits exactly what Zoo-style Warlocks are trying to accomplish, and it has all the pieces it needs to be a great 3-drop. It's probably not better than Imp Gang Boss, another good Zoo 3-drop, but they have room for another. So I think we might see this next to Imp Gang Boss and still be under the reign of really strong Zoo decks. So that'll wrap it up. That's it for me. Those are 10 cards for part 16, I think we're in. I can't keep track of the numbers. But anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or thoughts you'd like to share on this set of cards, feel free to leave them in the comments. I appreciate all your time. And until next time, game on.